is a video presentation for Chapter 3 on Ethics and Social Responsibility. Basically, there are two kind of polarities right now in culture, and it's one of moral absolutism and cultural relativism, or just relativism and absolutism. And this goes all the way back to the early Greeks. Plato, Aristotle believed that there was something essential that could be examined. For Plato, it was forms. For Aristotle, it was the human elements, humanity, nature, that they had particular things in them that would they would become essential qualities. In other words, there was for both of them something that you could point to and say that you may not be able to fully know the form, that is, that ideal in Plato's mind, or for Aristotle, you might not be able to know exactly what water is, all the components, but there's something to it that's fixed, that's essential to what it is. And then they had the sophists who believed that truth was fairly relative. So this has always existed, and there's polarities today. Your textbook talks about this, and again, I want you just to pause the video here and read through this text. What you'll notice is that this is not, although you would think that this is probably written from a religious point of view, because religious people believe in moral absolutes, and people who are not religious believe in relativists. There's no rules, and this isn't a religious book. This is a book on social science about organizations and people who run them. So what's interesting is that moral absolutism without reference to religion is somebody who actually thinks, this decision, if it basically it has to conform to some pre-existing standard. Now, it could be religious, it could be a standard in a country, or it could be some other existing standard. Or there are relativists who believe that really it has to conform basically to the local situation. So that's the way to think about these, is they're both referencing something, but the relativist has more to do with the fit in the particular situation, and the absolutist has to do with what's pre-existing and trying to conserve, which is why they're called conservatives, not just religious conservatives, just conservatives we're referencing something larger than the particular situation. So this polarity is huge. In decision making in organizations, people will refer to how things have always been done, existing values that made the organization great, versus particular situations. And as a manager, this is an ongoing and ever-present struggle. Another one I want you to be aware of, and I'm not gonna go through this, but I do want you to kind of see some of the most widely used. Lawrence Kohlberg developed his theory of moral development, and this is widely used in education, management science, and ethics. And basically, there are these three stages. There's a pre-conventional stage where the person, you and I, are very self-centered. There's a conventional stage where we're centered our ethical decision. And this is just simply suggesting what we consider to be right. What we consider to be right in a pre-conventional stage has a lot to do with, our personal gain, and we don't want to get harmed. But then as we grow, not necessarily older, right? It's not an age growth, it's a moral development growth. As we become more morally attuned, we think about how this decision affects others and our peers. And then finally, this post-conventional or final stage, which is how we live up to expectations in broader society. So not only, conventional stage is basically saying, how does my personal decision affect those around me? But the post-conventional stage is actually saying, before I decide anything, what are the expectations of my peers around me? That's all I'm going to say on this, but I do think you need to focus on this. This is something I'd be interested in testing you on and asking you about, which you'll see that both in the discussion board and in the quiz that's coming up. Here's another thing that's I think needs to be pointed out in the text, and this idea of stakeholders. Now, shareholders are people who own an organization, but stakeholders are people who are affected by or in the impact area of of an organization operating. So you see there in the middle box, there's the business firm, there's the employees, and the shareholders. The employees work for the company, and the shareholders own the company. Now, you don't have every company that's owned by shareholders. I get it. I mean, there's some privately owned companies, and there's smaller groups that own companies. But that's the nucleus of the company. If you look around the green and tan rectangles, these represent people from just, you would think they're really not connected to the business, but from a stakeholder perspective, they're all connected to the business. So again, I'd like you to pause the video, just read through that, but I want you to look at this in your text, because this is one of the new ethical considerations. It isn't just moral development like we talked about with Kohlberg. It isn't just simply trying to figure out if ethics fit in a particular situation or long-standing norms that we've been conserving for a long time. Now, this next iteration is that organizations, to be ethical, need to are socially responsible, because organizations are in society, and if we're going to try to figure out, so what's their role in society, the present conversation is transcending the previous conversations that had to do with ethics, the Kohlberg idea and moral cultural relativism versus moral absolutism. Now we're actually moving towards an understanding that says something to the effect of organizations are part of society, and so they need to be responsible not just to the employees and shareholders, but to all of society. So they are considering now the triple bottom line. Is it economically sound? Because they're considering stakeholders. Is it socially responsible? And an environment is even considered to be part of the stakeholder group. So it's an environmentally sound, socially sound, environmentally sound, as well as economically. You can see that, once upon a time when the stakeholder theory wasn't present, just the employees and the shareholders that would make up that economically sound block would be considered. Now, a stakeholder, because organizations are part of society, the argument goes, they need to be beholden to all of society, both socially and environmentally conscious of their business operations. So you end up with this, and this is our last slide. You end up with this. This is kind of this old versus new. The classical view said, you focus on the shareholders and you reduce business to profits and costs. You try to, consider the business purpose, but it really is in reference to profitability. And businesses can largely, not maybe intentionally, but largely kind of disregard the social environmental impact. The new socioeconomic view, again, is just saying businesses are part of society, they should function responsibly, and so to do so, they have to consider all of society, not just shareholders and employees, but stakeholders. So they have a responsibility to business. They have responsibility not only to increase profits, but to do so not just in the short term. And if they're going to do it in the long term, that means they're going to have to be around for a long time in organizations be for a long time in society, participating with individuals. So they need to consider those stakeholders. The result is obviously it improves public image, and ultimately in other conversations we could have, not now, but in other classes, this improves brand image, brand strength, which is important today. And the outflow of that for businesses is that they actually have resources, and they have some ethical obligations, and they can act responsibly. And in doing so, they build the goodwill of their stakeholders, which ultimately are their customers. So, okay, I'm highlighting some stuff in the text because I think these are the important things I want you to catch. Obviously, this is going to be part of our discussion board and part of the content that I'm going to ask you to review on the quiz. Okay, thanks.